Exploit blockchain. HackIT.
Black, editor at the Parallax. Please give a welcome. Next, we have Peter Todd from Applied Cryptography. And then our previous speaker, Michael Schloh from the Monero hardware team. Next, we have Andrei Karochenko from the Null AI founder. And then we have next Andrei Velecki from Pay2Mat CEO. And finally, Oleg Numenko from HeDIS CEO.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming to listen to this large panel talk about everything that's wrong with cryptocurrency. And I think I'd like to start off by having everybody that's up here with me give a quick, really quick, 1 or 2 sentence introduction about what they work on related to cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I'm Peter Todd. I'm an applied cryptography consultant and contributed to Bitcoin Core a while back and got a bunch of my own projects like open timestamps.
Hi, my name is Andrei Khavrichenko. I am founder of DevNull AI, and also I develop and release Dash Electrum wallet.
Hi, I'm Andrei. Started in crypto as a miner, then switched to trading, and then I was lucky enough to become business development guy in HackIT. And I also right now work on crypto payment solution.
Hi, Michael Schloh von Benowitz. I work with a variety of groups, including Monero, to design, manufacture, and produce hardware devices with secure elements, secure features.
Hi, I'm Oleg Naumenko. I'm co-founder and CEO of HeDIS Group. We developed a software and hardware authentication tool. And next month we will present on the market our new model. It's HeDIS Wallet. It's a wireless connectivity hardware wallet for cryptocurrency.
All right. Thank you, everyone. So I think I'd like to start off by referencing a news story that was published last week, and there was just another follow-up on it published yesterday or early this morning from Bloomberg on hardware security problems in the supply chain. And I think I'd like us to start with that and how it relates to cryptocurrency. Where are some of the hardware issues with cryptocurrency and the problems in securing them?
Well, I mean, first of all, and that's the Bloomberg story about Supermicro, and, is the story actually true or not?
Well, that's a whole nother issue.
I'd kind of lean towards maybe no, but I think there's still a core issue there. Aspects of it are probably true. For instance, Supermicro has shipped stuff with firmware that's exploitable. That shouldn't have been shipped that way. It's certainly true that you can do hardware implants. But I think, maybe the bigger story is this stuff is just so insecure out of the box. Even Supermicro in shipping to normal customers, they've gone and shipped servers which had full access to everything enabled by default with default passwords that are actually surprisingly hard to go turn off. This is kind of nothing new. You don't kind of need a little tiny grain of sand backdoor if it ships out of the box and secure.
Michael, can you take a stab at this one since this is sort of your area of expertise?
Well, that's nice. I think I have a couple opinions that do revolve around this. First is that we do have a world full of hardware that's either closed source or open source. Some of the closed source designs are claiming to be open source for marketing reasons, but where you see some of the value of the open source designs, you can very easily, if you're a hardware engineer, if you know your way around the parts and you have some particularly good equipment, you can make a stab at identifying defects or possible vulnerabilities on a hardware basis. This is why we do everything in open source and why I prefer open source hardware in my own professional and business life. The second of which is controlling the supply chain itself. It's not a very good answer to say that you can try to do as much as you can in-house. Manufacturing, once you get to levels of devices in millions in mass production, you're kind of requiring a whole new level of industry for that. It's always amazed me, however, that there are so many high-profile names and manufacturers out there that are termed fabless. They don't own their own fabrication facility. So this would be another method to reduce the risk of a repeat of this Bloomberg story where there was an integrated circuit inserted in the supply chain and not discovered for a long time.
Anyone else want to take a stab at that?
Yes, this whole story with the Bloomberg story made me think how vulnerable we are in terms of keeping our crypto. Now, if you think about it, the crypto exchanges, the guys that are most commonly attacked, are tending to keep a large part of their funds on cold storages. And there is a good reasoning behind that, because no matter what wallets you use, is it a hardware wallet, is it a mobile wallet, is it any other kind of wallet, when you start sending your crypto from it, you can be exposed. And you can be exposed in the ways that you have not even imagined, like this Bloomberg story. We don't know what part of this hardware is now in our ledgers or treasures. Was it involved there somehow? Or maybe there is some other thing. So think about crypto. If you're keeping it, think cold storage. Think it first, like reasonable.
Andre, do you want to chime in?
I would like to add that the products that we develop and release allows to be flexible in this regard, since Electrum is an open decentralized solution, and you can reconfigure and put in, pull out different parts of your key storage and processing pipeline according to current situation. And if, say, this piece of hardware is possible to be compromised, you can just pull it out and replace without changing your entire software stack.
Sorry, I think
Sure.
it can be because it's one of the steps in the war with China manufacturer and US company. Currently, US provide US-based manufacturers and looking for production stage, each of stage in US, and not produce and buy some China devices in the US market. And one of the steps in this news from Bloomberg, I think it can be true.
So one of the things that we've sort of alluded to in the supply chain problem is that there's also going to be a problem with software development, of course. And what are some of the big issues facing software security in cryptocurrency right now?
I mean, I think the biggest one is really the use of inappropriate languages. You know, that's the root cause of so many problems. And I mean, I'm kind of guilty of it myself. I'm a maintainer of the Python Bitcoin lib library, which is in Python. And, you know, Python's a reasonable language in many ways, but the reality is it doesn't have, you know, it doesn't promote programming practices with typing, for instance, that are sufficiently good to be clear that you're actually going to write the code that you thought you were writing. And I think we just have to get a lot better at this. And unfortunately, you know, we live in a world where software developers don't really reap the fruits of their bad actions. You know, if I as a software developer write buggy code, it's not really my problem, it's someone else's problem. And then you also get the issue, even going beyond that, of, well, if I write code, it's going to be dependent on other code. I bring in other libraries. Well, how do you even know what libraries you're running? You know, our dependency tracking chain, which is very similar to the supply chain issue in hardware, is the story on that's really, really bad. Rust is probably one of the few languages I know of where it's easy and common to declare dependencies cryptographically, in the sense that you will get the same code that you used last time. Now, that's not enough to necessarily prevent an attack, but it is enough to at least figure out where the attack came from after the fact. And knowing what happened reliably is a reasonable first step that most things haven't even begun to do.
Until our code is written by robots, and since formal verification methods are not still yet here in wide use, the only way to get solid code in production is to have as many eyes on it as possible. So go open source as much as possible.
Well, I have just one scary thought. So again, maybe the most precious thing for us is our crypto. So I'm thinking in terms of keeping crypto safe and that it's still where we left them. And now if you think about it in terms of software development, yes, of course, you previously mentioned that open source software is way better because we can double check what happens if, for example, if we are talking in terms of wallets, if it is custodian or non-custodian wallet, right? So it is always better if we know that our private keys are safe with us, we don't entrust them to anyone, and it is better to have open source project where we can test that, whether it is so or not. And now imagine what I said as a scary thought. So you're using a non-custodial open source wallet, you download it, I don't know, maybe from Apple Store, and then the software company decides that maybe it is time to take your crypto and run, and they push a software upgrade. And you have obviously checked the previous version of the wallet that you installed before, but do you commonly check the updates? And suddenly your non-custodial wallet becomes very much custodial, and the next day you're gone. They're gone, your crypto is gone. Sad story. I hope it doesn't come to that, but it's possible, theoretically.
I mean, is it possible to solve these with code, to solve them programmatically?
I kind of enjoyed the presentation regarding the ARM v8 instruction set additions that are able to sign pointers, for example. If you saw that a couple hours ago, it's very interesting, and it tells me that manufacturers, the hardware manufacturers, are taking a critical look at what some of the most relevant problems are in software. Now, this is not, for me, it's not relevant because the ARM v8 instruction set is very rich and high-powered. I'm doing things very low-powered. But what I do see is that they're backporting a lot of feature sets from their more popular Cortex-A products to the Cortex-M products, which are low-powered based. So an example of this is ARM's CryptoCell framework, which is, I think, a renamed version of Trust Cell or something like that. Maybe somebody can confirm that. So I'm happy that the manufacturers are taking a look and giving us more tools. It just means with ARM CryptoCell, if we are able to see those come in more and more microcontrollers, that there will be more developers encrypting more and more developers using stable and good random number generators. I'm hopeful that that will improve software on a cryptographic level.
I think it depends on the operation system. If you use iOS and one of the more closer operation system, it's many issues we have on Android, on Windows-based devices. For security solution, more important and combine hardware and software layer. It's more security and can provide more convenience to use.
I just want to quickly say, I think the ARM instruction, or the ARM signed pointer extensions and systems like that are a good sign of how badly we failed on the software side of things. There's just no reason why we should be using languages in 2018 that even make that type of problem an issue. Yet we still are. There's still tons of C and C++ code out there that just shouldn't exist. But, we failed at that.
Is it time for a software bill of materials for cryptocurrency? Would that help?
I mean, in my consulting practice, I frequently have clients who will ask me to go audit a code base, and usually the first thing I go ask is, well, I mean, how do you even know what code you're actually running? And frequently the answer is no, they don't. You know, I've had exchanges which are supposed to even have deterministic builds of Docker instances, and I can't even get the software to go run. You know, why isn't their software running on my system when they claim it's all deterministic, it's all rebuildable, they have the full configuration? They just don't in reality. So I think there's just no other option. And unfortunately, you know, people don't like this. People don't like to hear this. People want to go and have package managers where you just go type in a simple name of a package you're going to use as a dependency, rather than cut and paste some annoying cryptographic string. But there's just no alternative if you want to have secure software. You know, we have issues as dumb as typos, where people type in the wrong package and there's a typo squatter with a backdoored package. You know, these are things that just should not happen. Yet they do, because people are ultimately lazy, and ultimately too, they're undercut by their competitors who are taking shortcuts.
Are the rest of you as pessimistic as Peter is? All right, well, we're done here now, so we've figured out the problem.
I'd like to ask Peter, if you have, I mean, you've worked a lot with hardware as well. Some of the platforms are so low powered, they're running on coin cell batteries. And it's a bit difficult to imagine that we can run Rust on this kind of a platform. I mean, Golang maybe compiled down to binary. I'm not too familiar with all of these languages.
Yeah, well, I mean, my previous line of work, I was actually a hardware designer, and I mainly focused on analog. And it was, you know, it's kind of interesting in terms of verifiability how when we had safety critical things, you know, we didn't have security as a threat, but we had safety as an issue. And when I designed circuits that would do things that were safety related, usually my boss would forbid me from even using digital because it was too hard to go analyze what it did. You know, we would actually have, you know, simple things like, say, shutting off the system when the batteries get too hot, as an example. We would implement that in purely analog hardware with discrete components that you could actually inspect and figure out the full set of conditions they could be in very little effort. So, yes, we kind of went to the ultimate low end there. But, you know, more specifically in terms of, say, can you run Rust on a microcontroller? And I think the answer is, well, if you're in a model where you're willing to trust this stuff at all, you know, where you're willing to use that kind of level of complexity, I think the answer is yes. You don't really need that low power for most of our computing tasks. You know, we're not running things where we expect it to run on a coin cell for 20 years most of the time. I've actually designed a lot of hardware which was meant to run on a coin cell for 20 years. And then you use a little PIC microprocessor and hand-rolled assembly. But I think we don't, you know, that kind of circumstance is rare, and I think it's worth it to throw the extra resources to have more secure software with better tooling. And fortunately, you know, Rust exists and it compiles down to C code, and it's very similar.
Yes, I think it's very important because it's combine some software solution and layer with hardware. Some technology, it currently we use Touch ID, Face ID. It's a new technology which combine to trust this technology and provide a new solution for this way. I think as the next step it will be provide multi-factor authentication on the crypto area for sign each transaction.
By the way, speaking of Face ID, I read a story, like I think last week, about the criminal case in the States where the person who was convicted of doing something wrong, I'm not sure which, the police, or I think the police they were able to force him to open his mobile device using the Face ID. Now, they didn't have a possibility to force him to enter the PIN code, but they did have a legal way of forcing him to do the Face ID. So that basically means that each and every time we are using Face ID to lock our devices, we're doing something wrong, totally.
So it definitely changes per jurisdiction. But in the US, the law is that the court can compel you to turn over a physical key And a physical key can include your face for facial recognition, fingerprint. What the court cannot compel you to turn over is knowledge. So a PIN code or a password, at least so far in the US, is considered knowledge and not a key that the courts can compel you to turn over. It changes from country to country, so it's sort of hard to apply globally, but that's the background on what you're talking about. Whether it's wrong is a different issue because, you know, with fingerprint, with Touch ID on the iPhones, Apple, you know, got more than 90% of its users to use phone security for the first time. And I think this is an important issue for cryptocurrency as well, when you have to figure out whether making cryptocurrency more secure is going to cost users.
Maybe. I would like to comment on this topic and your comment too. I'm not a big believer in legal systems, and if a system could be compromised technically, it finally would be. So system of key storage should be as secure as possible from technical perspective, not alone, even in case of legal threats. And in the same time, it should stay user-friendly. That's why we are working on a more mobile-friendly user interface that would support Dash-specific features like instant transactions, privacy features, etc. To my opinion, this is exactly the problems that real user faces. Just yesterday, I wanted to book tickets for a flight, and it took me several hours to deposit my bitcoins to convert onto credit card just because Bitcoin network stopped. If there is no instant transaction, if there would be instant confirmation, I would be done in a minute. And it took me, I guess, 3 hours to wait for 3 confirmations.
I actually have one more thought, just to think about it. So if we use different ways of providing security, for different layers. So if any of you are using Trezor, you may know that you may get a series of your wallets by entering your PIN and completely different wallet by entering additional passphrase, right? Now, that being said, we may keep in mind that we can use our Face ID as an initial level of security, giving us, let's say, access maybe for a small amount of funds that we may need. And for going deeper, you need additional layers. That might be a good solution for cases like that. So you know that for convenient issues, you do have a small set that you can unlock with your face, but going deeper, you have another blocks.
See, I doubt these sort of two-factor things are really changing much of the security posture. They change stuff in the sense maybe your phone gets stolen and someone's trying to get into it. But when you were talking about what seems to be the bulk of the issues, which is bad software and exploits of a phone, well, when I'm looking at my phone and I'm entering commands to it, telling it to send bitcoins to another entity, whatever it is, I'm going through one factor. It doesn't matter how many factors I have to authenticate to the phone. By the time I've done that and then started doing things with the phone, there is really one factor, one central point of failure, which is the phone itself. If someone can compromise my phone, which seems to be something that can definitely happen, it doesn't matter how much Face ID, how many fingerprints, whatever I put in there, they're still going to get all my Bitcoin the moment I ever use that crypto wallet. If you want to go solve that kind of problem, you're forced to use things like multisig, where you have 2 independent verifications. And unfortunately, the user experience for that is just very poor and probably not something you're going to get people to use on a big scale. If I'm moving, say, $100,000, yes, that might be worth it. But we're not going to do this for payments of, $1,000, $100. It's just not going to happen. So we really got to focus on how do we keep these devices actually secure.
I think on the market we have 2 different points of view. First of all, it's security. Second, it's convenience. For mass market, more important is convenience way. in each manufacturer like Google, Apple, try to provide some technology and very convenience and not so security. And I think Touch ID, Face ID have a lot of security issues. But in authentication method, we have one important rule. For secure your identity, you need something you know, something you have, and something you are. Only multi-factor authentications, it's maybe true and secure solution.
I would like to add that I really believe that it's still possible to implement to give solutions to user that would be both convenient and secure. For example, I would love to have by default a wallet that would use multi-sig that would involve some authentication on the phone plus the second key on a hardware device. If this would be suggested to user by default, it would be a viable option to I guess.
I mean, is there any demand for these kinds of features?
Well, we haven't implemented yet. We haven't pushed, so I can't say. But definitely, it is on our roadmap.
I'd say the success of the hardware wallet industry in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies shows there's tons of demand for it. I think the issue there is more that the demand isn't translating into good products that actually make sense. And frequently, the sort of user experience model people get out of even a reasonable multi-sig thing doesn't really match what you actually want. Because again, even if I have a separate device where I do a double check of the transaction, where did the address that I'm paying to come from in the first place? It came from the device I assumed was compromised. I'll touch more on this in my talk tomorrow, but I don't think there's an easy way to solve that problem if you make the assumption that these devices are compromised. The better approach for the industry, which unfortunately is a bit of more than a bit of an uphill battle, is get your primary computing devices to be secure in the first place. Why do we live in a world where web browsers still get hacked? That's just ridiculous. Yet it still happens.
Anyone else? No? Okay. So one of the other big security issues that, and this is really out of the end user's hand in cryptocurrency, are the issues of securing the exchanges. I mean, you talk about it being ridiculous that browsers are still hacked, but the fact that umpteen billions of dollars in various coins have been stolen through the exchanges seems to be a pretty daunting proposition. What's going on there? Why are they still vulnerable? And is there any outcry about the hacks?
Well, I think it's important to note that with an exchange, you're adding an additional insecurity to the insecurity you already have through your primary computing device. Again, I'll give on my phone to show an example. So when you're looking at the user, the UI probably through a web browser on your phone, everything you're looking at could be a lie. If someone compromises your phone, they can make that look like it's doing whatever you want. They could be rewriting the UI to make you think you're transferring $1,000 to your uncle, when in reality you're transferring $100,000 out of your exchange account to some hackers in Canada. Us shifty Canadians, you don't want to lose your money to them.
You've never done this, right?
No comment. And then on the exchange back end, well, even if we solved all the wallet security problems, I think exchange would still have major issues with insider theft. My gut feeling is that most of the big hacks probably are actually insider theft in some way or another. It's hard to go prove this because when you're an insider, you can delete all the evidence, right? It's very different to attribute the stuff, but my kind of gut feeling, not based on evidence, is probably mostly insider theft. But I think what this really says is ultimately you should be keeping your money under your control in some way. Technologies like Lightning and multi-sig and various other smart contract-ish things make this all possible. But we don't even have exchanges auditing how many Bitcoins are under their control. If you can't even do that, which is useful for just purely from an internal exchange accounting point of view, you want the exchange to be able to ask itself, how many Bitcoins do we have right now? Have they been stolen? Yet we're not even at that point. So ultimately, I think this is sort of a failure market, and probably because people are making a lot of money on this. People are making a lot of money holding Bitcoin, and nobody really wants to be the first to put themselves in a position where they can't cover up a hack.
There's a lot there. Anyone want to chime in? Michael, you look like you've got thoughts.
Yeah, because it's difficult to imagine exchanges. I just don't use them. I do know that some don't hold any funds, so they just instantly exchange one value, one denomination for another, one currency for another. I guess there's some differences there, but I'm definitely a believer of keeping my own keys, my own privates nearby in places where I can physically access. If you can convince all other users who are so happy to use cloud services, or in other words, the computers of other people, to do the same is a bit tricky, I think.
Yes, I agree. In this way, we need to understand the different area for mass market and enterprise market. In enterprise market, we can use and provide some cybersecurity rules, which comply for these rules. For mass market, we don't have the solution, and it's very important for each user differently.
Yeah, I would like to say that within the last year, the situation with the cybersecurity of exchanges definitely got better. We're not hearing that many hack stories. And I think that they've got some more or less basic points covered. I mean, the big exchanges, if we're speaking about some small local ones, probably they don't have that much financial possibility to get the proper security. But we have seen throughout this year some other things where exchanges were hacked, I'd say, indirectly. So when there have been, on some small coins, there have been 51% attacks, and coins, I think it was The Verge, where a lot of Verge was just being generated out of thin air, transferred to exchange, they're converted to other currencies, and they were trying to withdraw it. Now, can we call it the exchange problem? Probably not. But exchanges are the ones that have to deal it in the very end.
Maybe, but I would call it that particular blockchain defect, not an exchange. But finally, yes, exchange would be called for an action in this case.
It is blockchain defect, but still the one who is suffering, it is either the exchange, the owners of it, who are having to compensate the expenses, or the customers.
Yes.
Someone has to pay, right?
As for me, I am a strong believer in the thesis that you own only those coins where you keep your keys yourself. So if you keep your coins on the exchange, it's their money, not yours. Yet, when I transfer my funds, say, to Bittrex, I would like to be sure that what they display in my browser is true, and they can fulfill their promise. Unfortunately, I don't see a way to, really technically solid way to make sure that what I see is true until we would get to signed code execution on the client end, but on exchange end, I believe it could be solved only by proper cold storage policy and ceremonies regarding putting to cold storage, pulling from cold to hot, etc.
So, I mean, it sounds to me like you all are talking about a situation in terms of cryptocurrency and security that is disturbingly similar to the Wild Wild West, where and not the movie, but the era, where you don't know about whether your stuff is secure and whether your bank has been held up and what the situation is in regards to anything related to security. What are some of the easiest low-hanging fruit security problems that need to be fixed like yesterday? What are some of the things that can be fixed, right? Not high-level theoretical, but like what are the basics that just need to be taken care of?
You know, I'll go and mention deterministic builds mainly because it is an active process of getting fixed. You know, Debian, as an example, has made very big progresses in making sure that ultimately you know that the binaries you run actually correspond to the source code you're expecting to go run. And on the one hand, that took an enormous amount of work. On the other hand, that work is actually progressing and getting to the point where you and I can go run that on a day-to-day basis. And I'd like to see a lot more of that, because after all, if you don't know what you're running, I mean, right there, all hope is lost.
There are a bunch of very easy fixes that could be done yesterday. Transfer funds out of exchanges and custodial wallets to your own. Get a good open source wallet on your side, perhaps a hardware wallet in addition, and use multi-sig and store your recovery key properly. That's it.
We may have noticed then on a lot of exchanges and other, I mean, just normal websites, when you're creating an account and you're entering the password like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the system doesn't even allow you to create this kind of account. They say your password is wrong, change it. So we have like some basic way of educating people and forcing them not to do the stupid mistakes. Maybe we should continue and expand the thing at least by making everyone use 2FA. I mean, this is the easiest way what we can do in terms of the exchanges. The account cannot be verified without two-factor. The funds cannot be withdrawn without email, confirmation. Right now it is optional, but I don't think we need to keep it optional. We need to force these measures.
I'll take a stab at it. I find that one of the low-hanging fruits are maybe attacking the problem of users not understanding so well how their wallets work, maybe misplacing, forgetting their password, formatting their drives, things like this. It's the novice users that we can maybe help out a bit more. Now, a lot of providers, manufacturers are doing their best. They're coming up with creative ideas, paper wallets provided with products, steel wallets, and so on. My own approach, simply because I work on hardware so often, I'm trying to get the price down of hardware so much that people feel comfortable purchasing or obtaining more than one wallet at a time, possibly distributing the others 3, 4 at a time to their family members. They then have copies. Whether they fall into the wrong hands is one question, but if they fall in the toilet, there is another 2 or 3 copies hanging around the house which can be used with the same keys.
I think in cybersecurity area, long-standing fruits, it's a human factor, because people don't like to use a strong password, don't like remember different passwords for different services, and try to make some simple way for identity. One of the currently rules, it's a paper wallet for crypto wallets. It's also not secure solution, because you can put this 12 or 24 words on the paper. You can store this, save this paper wherever you want, and you can lose this paper and lose your money. And I think a human factor is the biggest issue, and currently we don't have existing solution for solve this.
All right, we have time for 2 questions from the audience, as long as you keep it to 1 sentence. It's got to be a quick question. There's a guy over there.
I have a question to the Peter. You think about Lightning Network and how is it secure? Will you use it in the future? Thanks.
Most of the Bitcoin transactions I do right now are through Lightning. So I definitely go use it. I mean, I think the reality is it's definitely a different security model than Bitcoin itself. But amongst all the stuff we talked about, I don't think losing your money due to the different security model Lightning is your most likely way of losing money with Bitcoin. I think it's much more likely your computer getting hacked or you're losing money on an exchange. So in the context of this discussion, that security issue is pretty low on my list of things to worry about.
One more from the audience? Anybody? No? Okay. Great. Well, thank you everybody for taking time out of your day to sit with us here on stage, and thank you in the audience for joining us for this panel.
Thank you.
HackIT. Exploit blockchain.